First question, just to confirm, we don't have an SAQ tomorrow, right? That's incorrect. No, you do. You have multiple choice and an SAQ. That is why I'm trying right now to decide what I will cut out of the test to give us time to write the SAQ. Last year, this was actually a 45 question test, but do not expect anything that long. We're going to be looking more at around 35 questions and an SAQ. So will there be an SAQ? Yes, that's what I was just saying, but the question was probably put in a little late. So we have multiple choice, SAQ, and LEQ in the next 2 days. Well, sort of. Your multiple choice test and the SAQ will be tomorrow, and then Friday you will be beginning the planning process of your first LEQ in class, and I'll be working with you on that. We'll talk through that some, and you should leave class with a thesis that has been returned to you with comments. You should have, using those comments, an outline, a general outline of your LEQ, and then hopefully you can get started writing on the contextualization and the thesis for your first paragraph before you leave the room. That would be my goal for you on Friday. And then you would finish the essay over the weekend and turn it into me on Monday. Will we have 15 minutes as we did last test for the SAQ? You may be, it'll probably be closer to about 13 minutes. But I may give you like a minute overtime on that, maybe 14. How will the LEQ be graded? It's graded on the rubric, which is described in the video I made on the LEQ. So you'll be graded on a scale of 1 to 3, 4, 5, or 6. The LEQ is out of 6 points. Let me get another book to put under this computer so it's not as low. How will the LEQ be homework? Yes, over the weekend. What specific cities or empires do we need to know from chapter 6 stuff in the Americas? Good question. So if you take if you think about like the key concepts which guide this course, the main empires which are mentioned in those key concepts include the Maya and the Moche of South America, and it may include, I'm trying to pull it up right now, the Teotihuacan civilization, but I usually bring that in a lot more in the next unit, but that is fair game. I don't really cover it much in unit 6 or unit 2. I will kind of go back and mention some of the things borrowed from these cultures for our next time period in the post-classical era when we get to studying the Americas. But for the most part, you need to know those. Of course, you also need to know some information about Polynesian peoples, and you're responsible for everything in chapter 6, although that is something I kind of leave to you guys. We just don't have time to cover all of that in class, which is why we have the book that covers those things that we cannot get to. Next question. Do we need to know in detail what happens in each of the 3 Punic Wars? No, that would be a little too much. You need to generally know the causes and the effects of the 3 Punic Wars, more so than you need to know what happened in them. That's something that we went over a little bit last year, but is really too specific for what we're doing in the AP class this year. Let's see. Next question. Do we need to know any geography? You always need to know geography. That is super important in any class. So you can expect to see probably maps on the test or references to places that you had to learn for your geography test, but it's not going to be a geography quiz, or you're not going to see multiple choice questions about where is this place or that. That's something I tested in the geography test. As I said in class, the geography test is more to give you a allow you to conceptualize where all of these places are in the world while you are reading about them. And while we work in class and we discuss them. So that's the big thing, giving you kind of that mental map of the world that you may not have had before. Are Roman law and republic considered inventions? So not in the sense, I think, of what we're asking on the test in terms of, or that are in the key concepts in terms of the innovations that spur on trade, but Roman law is an important development in state building. So that is particularly important. The key concepts in key concept 2.2, it talks about empires and states developing new techniques of imperial administration based in part on earlier political forms. And so Roman laws, or these elaborate legal systems, which are developed not just by the Romans, but by the Qin and Han Chinese and the like, those would be considered more so new techniques of imperial administration, not specifically in inventions or technologies, as we were kind of talking about them in dealing with trade. So that's a good question, Lucy. Chase asks if the LEQ and SAQ will have different questions. Yes, certainly. They will be dealing with different key concepts, most likely. They will be dealing with different questions. What capital cities do we need to know? Good question. So actually in the key concepts, if we look at key concept 2.2, which is all about the development of these second wave civilizations or empires that we see, I think the exact phrasing is I'm blanking right now, the development of states and empires. That's it. So with this, we see new imperial centers develop, and the key concepts focus on several of them. Persepolis, which is the ceremonial capital built by the Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, and we looked at images from Persepolis. It also becomes a trade center. Chang'an, the capital of China, Pataliputra, which we find in South Asia. Other important cities, Athens, of course, in Greece, the center of the Delian League or the Athenian Empire. Carthage, of course, the Carthaginian Empire in the Western Mediterranean. Rome would be one that you need to know. Alexandria, for Alexander's short-lived empire, of course, that's going to be like the center of knowledge in the world, also a center of trade in the Mediterranean, as Rome will be. Later on, at the very end of this time period, and certainly important for the entirety of next time period, is the city of Constantinople. And then one in the major city in the Americas to know is Teotihuacan, which is found in modern-day Mexico. So those are the ones that are listed in the key concepts, and the one that ones you should be able to know as examples. These are, again, illustrative examples. So they are examples of imperial cities that served as the center of trade, religious rituals, political administration, what have you, for these empires. And that's a good question. What do we need to mainly know when talking about trade networks? So I would say that you need to know, where they went geographically. I think it would be important to know what was traded on those, and be able to make connections between what the trade network was and what was traded on that network. And of course, know the role that empires played in those trade networks, as well as the role that technology played in increasing trade throughout this time period. Of course, the biggest overland trade route of this era is the Silk Road. The Mediterranean peaks in this time period too with the Romans. But the Indian Ocean will still be growing. The Trans-Saharan network begins in this time period, in the second half of the time period, and each of them um, will reach their peak. Both the Indian Ocean Trade Network and the Trans-Saharan Overland Network will reach their peak in our next time period. But it is important to know some of the developments that spur them on in this unit, because that'll be important for making them peak in the next. Let's see what else we got here. Do we need to know much about the Royal Road? Know that it was connected with the Persian Empire, certainly helps with trade and the movement of empire and or the movement of people, as well as the being a road system that allowed for greater communication throughout the empire. So that would be the Royal Road. So that goes to Charanya's question. Ruby asks, do we need to know the specific goods that are traded? Do we need to know which empires traded which goods? So I would say you need to know examples of goods that are traded on each network. So, you know, if it's Silk Road, those are going to be your high value to low weight ratio goods. Take a look, of course, at Key Concept 3.3 for some other good examples. But along the Silk Roads, you had silk traded, gemstones were traded. You had some spices traded along these roads. For the Mediterranean trade route, that's going to be the more bulky items: timber, marble, glassware, silk, spices. Those things will still be traded. Silver. Those things will still be traded in the Mediterranean because they get traded throughout the Mediterranean after they reach that end of the Silk Road. Some of those goods, like perfumes, come from overland trade from Arabia. If we're talking about the Indian Ocean, pepper, cotton textiles, dyes, other heavy goods, those will be traded. And if we're talking about the Trans-Saharan Network, which again is just getting started in this time period, we're going to be looking at salt moving from the northern region to sub-Saharan, and from sub-Saharan Africa to northern Africa, slaves, gold, and ivory will pretty much remain constant for this course. Are we going to go 12 minutes later because we got going to get the audio to work? Sure, we'll go to 9:12 if need be. Neil, how much do we need to know about the Gupta Empire? Oh, good question. Well, the Gupta Empire being a South Asian empire, you might need to know a good bit about it. Just thinking about it comparatively, right? We've so far compared it to places like Rome, and we've compared it to, of course, the Mauryan Empire, the Han Empire, etc. So the Gupta Empire is considered to be a golden age of India or South Asia. It was relatively peaceful. There were, of course, scientific and artistic endeavors that took place under the Gupta. There was certainly a lot of trade that took place with the Gupta. We also see Indian epics written during this time, which will come to really define Indian culture. We also see just like major leaps in science and culture. So, for example, like the concept of the number 0 comes about in this time. They develop models of the solar system that are heliocentric. The game of chess becomes popular. The numeral system that we commonly refer to as Arabic numerals actually develop in India first. They will come from India to Arabia to the rest of Europe. So that develops in this time period. As far as the Gupta, you need to know, of course, it was much less centralized than what we see in the Mauryan Empire. It conquers much less territory than the Mauryans were able to, and that's for many of the reasons we've talked about with South Asian geography and diversity. But it was, in its time from about 300 to 550 CE, a prolific era for India, especially because of trade that they participated in. Really good question about the Gupta Empire there. Sejal asks, what dates should we know? Know that the time, this starts in 600 BCE and goes to 600 CE. That's our time period. Dates that stand out to me, although I wouldn't say these are dates that you have to memorize, but dates that stand out to me are 509 BCE, when the Roman Empire begins, 476 CE, when the Roman Empire ends, though technically the first part of Rome took a while to become an empire, but 509 when Rome really begins as a republic. Know that around the year, I don't know, 40 BCE, 30 BCE, somewhere in there, Rome changes over to an empire after several civil wars. Other dates. The Persian Empire begins around 550 BCE. I think it's Alexander the Great's empire is leading up to 323. I think he dies in 323 BCE. Again, these are just like dates that are coming to mind. I wouldn't say necessarily dates you have to memorize. But in general, no ranges. So like the Han Dynasty from roughly 200, I think about 206 BCE to 220 CE. So know if you're thinking about Qin or Han Dynasty, 200 to 200, and you'll be in the right zone there. The Mauryan Empire starts around roughly 300 BCE, and it goes to a little past 200 BCE into the 180s or something like that. The Gupta Empire from about 300 to 550 or 600 CE. Again, ranges I think are more important than hard and fast dates. There won't be any question on the test that would ask you a specific date, so don't expect that. Let's see. Chris asks, how important are yokes and Gal ships on the test? Well, they're excellent examples of technology that come out of this time period and facilitated long distance trade. Yokes, we didn't talk about yokes in class, but basically they allow you to like hook multiple animals together to let those animals like work together in pulling good carts for overland trade. They're also going to be important for, or developments of yokes will be important for farming as well later on. We'll see the development of like newer and less restrictive yokes for animals. The Dhow ship, of course, which had the lateen sail, that is super important for the development of Indian Ocean trade. Is the test as a whole based on change over time? Well, that will be some questions that you'll see will reference this idea of what changed over a time period and what stayed the same. That is one of our historical thinking skills. You haven't really picked the SAQ yet for tomorrow, but that would be a good historical thinking skill for the SAQ. But that's kind of tested throughout. We look more at change over time as we move deeper in the course. But when I think about change in continuity over time with this time period, I would tend to think about, for example, like what changes in trade from the start to the end of this time period. Certainly we see that new technologies spurring on more trade would be a great change. Although some of these trade networks had existed for quite some time. The trade throughout the Mediterranean continues in this time period. I would think about religion, right? We see some new religions develop, but we also see some continue from our previous period. They will develop and they will change and they will be codified, but Judaism and Hinduism really continue from our previous time period, where we see new religions develop. So that's going to be embedded throughout this course. But there won't be your essay is not a change in continuity over time essay this time around. It's comparison. What was the important South Asian city? Oh, from the Mauryan and Gupta Empire, Pataliputra. Pataliputra is, I think, what you're referencing there. as a example of an imperial city. All right. What are the 3 successor states of Alexander's empire? Oh, you're testing me now. The 3 successor states of Alexander's empire breaks up into Ptolemaic Egypt and, oh gosh, this is the first question to stump me tonight, I think. I'm trying to think about it. Ptolemaic Egypt, all right, I'm going to go to it. I'm going to go to a book. And give me 1 second, because I know exactly where this is actually in my old book. So sit tight. All right. Somebody who did this, who did theme 3, should be answering this question for us from our presentations. When Alexander's empire breaks up, it breaks into the Antigonid kingdoms of what is basically Macedonia and Greece, into the Ptolemaic kingdoms of Egypt, and the Seleucid kingdoms of the Middle East and Persia. Man, that was one that's from way back. So good job stumping me, someone. Ruby. All right, congratulations. Will our studying of notes on Get a 5 lessons help us? Oh yeah, you bet they will. Well, I would say, those notes are there for you to go back to. Those videos are excellent review. As I said, you can use them in one of 2 ways, and people use them differently. Some people choose to use get5.com to preview content, which is how I prefer to use it. I usually look at those videos and before I go and teach a new unit, just to refresh myself on the information. But some people like to use them as review and as a last minute way of studying, going back through major topics or topics that you feel that you're not as strong in. But I think definitely those videos will help. They're good, solid overviews of what we've learned. Of course, the notes for get5.com are done for you in the margin. So you can just kind of, if you want to scroll back through those, that's fine. But generally, if you've watched those videos, you probably have what you need, unless you remember something specifically you want to go back and look up. How important is it to know specific plagues? Yeah, probably not that important. I would say, there's 3 plagues I think that are on the 1-pager. Let me click over to my 1-pager on another screen. Yeah, so a smallpox plague called the Plague of Galen, the Plague of Justinian at the very end of this time period, which is a bubonic plague, which killed 40% of Constantinople. I'll actually talk more about that in our next time period, even though it occurs in this. And then the Plague of Cyprian. So those are 3 within Rome. Just know kind of there is the bubonic plague which strikes and smallpox strikes. Of course, that hits China as well, but just know examples. You don't have to know specific names of plagues. Though if you want a name of a plague, the Plague of Justinian affects the Byzantine Empire. But don't get that confused with Western Rome and its fall. How much do we need to know about the 3 successor states of the Macedonian Empire? Good question. More important than, I don't think how they governed and the like. I don't think that is of particular importance. I think more so knowing the effects of Alexander's spread of Greek culture. That is the most significant thing. Also, the establishment of cities, especially a city like Alexandria in Egypt, as a new cultural and trade center. I think that is significant as well when thinking about Alexander's conquests. Just in general, the Ptolemies, or the Ptolemaic Egypt, just to give you a little bit of information, was home, of course, to Alexandria. Alexandria was probably the largest and most diverse trade city in the Mediterranean. It also was home to the Library of Alexandria, which, of course, housed at least every written work known. It was interesting when ships would come into Alexandria, if they were found to have any scrolls or books on board, those were confiscated until they could be copied by the librarians at Alexandria before the scrolls would be returned to people on the ships and they could take them back with them. If there was any books or anything on there that the people at the Library of Alexandria did not have. That's how important knowledge was in that time within the city of Alexandria. So I think that's a fairly good example of the importance of these cities established in the kingdoms that were left in the wake of Alexander's conquest. How much do we need to know about the Kushan Empire? Kushan Empire is pretty short-lived. I don't know if I've ever seen it come up on the AP exam, but it's there. The overall, yeah, I mean, I don't really touch it much. Whatever you get out of your book, that's probably enough. I don't think I have any questions regarding it on the test. The Kushan Empire, for those of you who are wondering what it is found in in South Asia. It's short-lived, basically from about the year around the turn of the Common Era. So sometime around the year 0 to 50, probably it starts, and it's around to about 300. But it's not a ton else that we learn about it. Yeah, I don't want to confuse you anymore. The Mauryan and the Gupta, they're the big ones in this time period. If time period falls in 600 to 600, we have to know stuff from chapter 6 that falls outside of that. So yeah, chapter 6 does go a little beyond this. I would say if it falls past it, in terms of outside of like Teotihuacan, Maya, or Moche civilization, probably not so much that you need to know about it. That's one of our problems, of course, with periodization and choosing the time periods that we have, is that when we have these other regions of the world that don't conform with how we would say, this idea of classical cultures, right? They had their own process of development and their own benchmarks for their history and their own turning points. And so, our book covers it as best they can, and don't necessarily stay strictly within that time period. I know it can be frustrating, but keep in mind, it's the whole arc of history course here. We try to stay within these time periods, but sometimes things bleed over. What religions are most commonly asked about on the test? Well, I'd have to look at my test exactly to see and remind myself. Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Taoism. Certainly Confucianism will appear a lot, but that is more of a belief system. So those are the ones I'd say you'd be most likely to see. Zoroastrianism maybe might pop up with Persia. Is there going to be much on Africa due to the lack of it on the review of the key concepts? Yeah, outside of North Africa's role in the Mediterranean trade, thinking about Carthage and thinking about Ptolemaic Egypt and the Roman conquest of northern Africa, it may not play as great of a role. Now, keep in mind the Bantu migrations are still occurring over a long period of time in sub-Saharan Africa. So we mentioned those in the last unit. Those, of course, will continue in this unit. East Africa is involved in the Indian Ocean trade, albeit limited in this time period, much more so in our next time period, as the Swahili coast will really develop as an important, really kind of network of cities. And the major kingdoms of West Africa will become much more important in the next time period as the trans-Saharan trade connects West Africa more so with North Africa and the Middle East and the Mediterranean. So, yeah, whereas we have talked kind of, or you've read a limited amount on Africa, there's actually a good bit of it in this unit. Maybe not so much the focus, because we don't see many large classical civilizations there, but thinking about Axum and the importance of trade with Axum and the spread of Christianity to that region of basically northern Ethiopia, it does make an appearance. I don't know what percentage of the test would refer to it, if that is the question. Hey, Moad joined us. Nice. Welcome. Classic Wapter. What we need to know about the Mauryan Empire. Good question here. We've talked about the Gupta earlier, but I did not talk in much detail about the Mauryan. So, quick rundown of the Mauryan Empire, founded by Chandragupta Maurya. So not like as we think about like with the Gupta Empire, Chandragupta, but Chandragupta Maurya founded the Mauryan Empire, and it basically, as an empire, begins in the wake of the retreat of Alexander the Great, basically taking advantage of this kind of chaos and conquering this large region of northern India or northern South Asia, and manages to conquer most of the Indian subcontinent, which is probably the most complete we're going to see for some time. It was actually, at the time it was created, the largest empire at the time. Now, it is, of course, the most famous leader from this is probably Ashoka. And if you recall Ashoka, he was a convert to Buddhism. He built these pillars, the pillars of Ashoka, all around the Indian subcontinent, as he united the Indian subcontinent under himself through incredible military conquest. But after his conversion to Buddhism, he kind of turned over that new leaf, where he sought to kind of heal the wounds of conquest, to bring about peaceful existence, better trade. We looked at that sample source about Ashoka when we did some practice questions in class. But he built the pillars around India. He also built Buddhist temples, or stupas, around India, sent out missionaries to try to spread Buddhism during his reign, and was also very tolerant of others and allowed Buddhists into the government. Now, later on, there will be leaders that aren't so tolerant of Buddhism, but Ashoka, that is kind of one of the things he's most known for, is the kind of bump Buddhism gets under his rule. Pretty remarkable how one leader's conversion to a religion, also seen with Constantine's conversion to Christianity, can take a religion from kind of a minority sect religion that is within small groups of people, that especially like lower classes, and take it mainstream. What do we need to know about Christianity and Judaism? So remember that Judaism continues into this time period from our last time period. It is codified in this time period. We start to see the holy book, or Torah, of Judaism really take shape around the year 500 BCE, and it will continue to take shape for some time after that. The Jewish people, the Hebrew communities, of course, had been conquered over time and had been in exile. The Persians allowed them to return to the Levant, or the Eastern Mediterranean. And we see that later on they're conquered again by the Romans. So this will become like the beginning of this Jewish diaspora that will occur, especially around the Mediterranean. Christianity, of course, I would say, if you haven't looked at it yet, a good review could be the video I made on the rise and spread of Christianity. That's linked in the homework calendar, tinyurl.com/wapcal. And Christianity founded by Jesus of Nazareth. Around the year 30, he has some followers. His followers believed that Jesus was the Son of God and the embodiment of God. That's actually one of the things that's debated in the early Christian church, whether or not Jesus was fully God and fully man, or whether he was fully God and just like not really man, or he was 100% man and not fully God. Those are the types of things that were certainly debated among the early Christian communities until the Council of Nicaea. The religion of Christianity, though, is very small. In fact, they would not even consider themselves a separate religion from Judaism early on, until the disciples of Jesus and some of the earliest converts to Christianity start spreading this religion around the Mediterranean. They do so by visiting different places, spreading their message, spreading this good news or this gospel. They write letters, and basically they take the teachings of Jesus and they take them step continuously further, and basically kind of teach people about what the teachings of Jesus and et cetera, in words that people could understand, especially like in the local languages. Paul wrote to the people in Greek, and they wrote to people in whatever their local languages were, which started to see people converting to Christianity. Of course, it was still fairly small, caught on especially among the lower classes and women in the Roman world. Christians, even in the Roman Empire, which was actually very tolerant of many different religions. That's something that we also often don't equate with Rome, but that's not. We think Rome, no, that must have been intolerant. They persecuted Christians, but that is not actually true. Rome was a very tolerant place. They allowed Jewish people to continue their practices and continue their sacrifices at their temple. The key was you also had to make sacrifices to the Roman emperor as well. And that is what Christians refused to do. They did not want to acknowledge the Roman emperor as anything godlike or anywhere close to a level of equality with Jesus or anything along those lines. And so it was the rejection of the Roman emperor that really led to the wrath of the Romans, perhaps. Also, Christians are blamed for a lot of problems because they're this really this group of people who are not well known, right? They believe the weird stuff, and they're this small group. And how come they're not worshiping the Roman gods? So they caught a lot of blame and persecution for that. Of course, much persecution and ridicule and oppression comes from ignorance. So maybe that was the case. Maybe it was Christians actually, causing issues or advocating against the Roman government. You'd have to look into a more historical source than just these generalizations I'm making. But eventually, Christianity will gain a foothold when Constantine converts to Christianity, and then it will become more standardized after he calls the Council of Nicaea, which calls Christian leaders together to basically work out differences in belief and try to determine what Christianity is, and kind of work on codifying it more so. And then the Emperor Theodosius will make Christianity the only recognized religion and only allowed religion within the Roman Empire. And so that is another big boost to Christianity as things turn and other religions become persecuted in the Roman Empire if you are not Christian. What do we need to know about, I lost the question, the Greek Hellenistic Empires? I think I answered that question a little bit earlier. The big ones are knowing about the spread of Greek culture, Hellenistic culture, and of course the examples of syncretic culture that develops. For example, in India, we see, I think somebody had in their presentation a really good picture of like this Greco-Buddhism, like a picture of the Buddha in Greek clothing, or Greek style architecture expanding, or the emphasis on Greek learning or Greek style learning and philosophy and the writings of people like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. Also, upper class people across the Hellenistic world, speak Greek. From the time of Alexander until the Roman Empire takes over, every ruler of Ptolemaic Egypt spoke Greek. They didn't speak the local Egyptian language. So to be upper class was to be Hellenistic, was to be like the Greeks. How do we access the one-pagers? So go to Freemanpedia. I'll put the link here. If you go to Freemanpedia, that did not allow me to send it. So for some reason, it's not letting me send a message into this chat. So something must have happened. So in terms of the one-pagers, you can access them also by going to the PLP, going to Unit 2 within the PLP or that project. At the very bottom, the last checkpoint is review. There is a PowerPoint, and they're linked within that PowerPoint that we looked at today. If you were on Freemanpedia already, he has a link that says AP World History, and then in review and then under that, the one page will be there for access. Oh man, I must be way behind. Zach answered the questions there about the kingdoms of Alexander. Hellenistic Greece, that's fine. The Antigonids, Hellenistic Greece, same thing, Zach, so feel redeemed there. What will this stuff, will there be stuff on the test based on information that you don't know about? That I don't know about or that you don't know about? There is a possibility that you will get a question on something that you don't remember reading, or maybe I didn't address directly in class. That's always a possibility. I do like throwing some curveballs on the test. However, you should, every question, if it's something that you have not seen before, you will be able to apply what you know already to the questions, and hopefully between the sources and what you know, you will be able to figure it out. So it would be a similar trend perhaps with something we haven't studied, rather than something completely new. For example, if I put on there some kind of an example of new technology or reading about some new technology on a trade network, you would probably be able to go through that same thought process of what its effects might have been on these trade routes, just as we thought about when we learned about the camel saddle or the stirrup or the Dow ship or the lateen sail. All right, how important are specific invading groups? Yeah, they're good evidence, especially on your essay. If one of your similarities happens to be that there was nomadic pressure on borders from nomadic groups, perhaps. So the big ones to know: the Xiongnu put pressure on the Han. The Hun migration forces Germanic tribe pressure on Rome. Some examples of those are the Visigoths and Vandals. I think they're probably the most important. Though I'm sure there's more. And the White Huns invade India. The Guptas specifically, I believe. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. Will you know the answer to everything on the test? I plan on knowing every answer to everything on the test, but this is what I've only had 2 100s on tests for me, and they were for units 5 and 6, although I have been kind of writing and rewriting tests, and I think they get harder, but maybe they're not. So yeah, we'll see. If anybody makes 100 on this, it would be the first 100 on this test anyways. What's the difference between the Huns invading China and Rome? Well, the Huns don't invade Rome specifically. They put pressure on groups who eventually invade Rome. And the reason for that is primarily, well, we believe it's probably some type of environmental change in Central Asia that forced the Huns to migrate to new areas. And from that, they pushed, and it became basically a domino effect, putting pressure on the Roman Empire. So that's the big thing. Somebody asked me earlier about the relationship between the Xiongnu and the Huns, and I'll just be honest, I don't know the exact relationship there. If the Xiongnu, in what way they are related to the Huns, but the Xiongnu are the big ones for going against the Chinese there. There is, I want to see if it's still, they may have removed it from the key concepts. It used to be those specific relationships were mentioned in the key concepts, but I don't think it's there any longer that I can see. Yeah, they used to have examples of security issues along the frontiers, but they no longer keep those in there. But I would say Xiongnu, Han China, White Huns, India, Germanic invasions because of Hun migration, Rome. End of story on that one. What do we need to know about the Americas and Pacific Oceania? Know kind of some examples culturally of these groups of Oceania and the Pacific peoples. Think about trade between the two, migration throughout Oceania. That's probably the most important thing for them this time period. In the Americas, Teotihuacan, is the largest pre-Columbian city. We see, cultural signifiers, large scale architecture, pottery. We'll see kind of the beginning of the Chinampa system, which is a specific type of farming, but we're going to talk much more about that in the next time period, so don't worry about it too much in this one. The Mayan culture, of course, with the Mayans, they have the only developed writing system in the New World. So that is probably fairly significant. Of course, we know them for their calendar and their mathematics and their astronomy. They influence the entire region around them. They build these large pyramid structures. So that's super important. So there's some things to chew on for those questions. Good question, Hannah. How much do you know about the beliefs of the religions? The basics, I would say. The beliefs of the religions, like the core beliefs, right? So, Taoism, the idea of living in harmony with the Tao or the way, right? Living in harmony with nature. Buddhism, seeking an end to suffering. You do this by following, the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths are what arrives at this idea that all life is suffering and that overcoming suffering will help you reach nirvana. Christianity, the belief that salvation is through Jesus of Nazareth, and following the teachings of Jesus, which of course are heavily influenced by Judaism. Christianity also teaching that living a good life will allow you to reach heaven or a heavenly existence for eternity. And if you don't, well, then hell awaits, so to speak. So encouraging people to live a good moral life based on the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth and his disciples. Let's see. Oh, I lost my place. It is 9:02, so if you're putting in more questions, I may not get much further. Apparently there's a lot more here, so I'm going to kind of speed through the rest. Last one I left off was beliefs of religions. Are you grading theses, or we get a chance to correct them before they write in the LEQ? Oh, I'm not grading theses. I'm just giving you feedback on them, and then you'll make those corrections or improve upon them, and then they will be graded as a part of the LEQ. Will SAQ or test corrections ever be put in? Yeah, probably. Actually, I'll probably have some time tomorrow to do that, finally. The SAQs are on the bottom of my grading pile because rewrites are always at the very bottom. I'm going to try to get through those in the next few days, hopefully. We need to know anything about Greek philosophy. Ooh, good question. So in terms of Greek philosophy, know that they questioned a diverse range of topics and ideals. They questioned, what the world is made of. They questioned the universe. They questioned reason, logic. We see the development of Socratic method. That's something that's probably important to know that comes out of this. We see kind of basic scientific method, observing the world, though not the scientific method develops in the scientific revolution later on. And then you need to know kind of the three major thinkers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates, who encouraged everyone to question things around them and even question people around them. Plato, kind of considered the founder of Western philosophy, writes the Republic. Aristotle, teacher of Alexander. All right, what do we know about Buddhism? Buddhism develops in India around the year 500 BCE, founded by Siddhartha Gautama, or the Buddha. Taught the desire leads to suffering. You can end suffering by ending one's desire, and that's done through the Eightfold Path. Of course, Buddhism splits into really kind of two main branches that you need to know right now, which are Theravada, or the strict path, the very narrow path, and Mahayana Buddhism. Now, the importance of Mahayana Buddhism is that it was adaptable. It was very it was more apt to blend with other cultures and develop more syncretic beliefs. So that will spread into China, especially. Do you coordinate tests with Mr. Goldstein? I do not. Maybe I should. I'm sorry if you have another test for him tomorrow. I need to maybe. All my tests are already planned out for the year, so we have a test every 28 to 30 days. So that's it's just, it falls when it falls. What differences do we need to know between Hinduism and Buddhism? I would say, Buddhism rejects the caste system. It teaches the Eightfold Path, achieving nirvana, as opposed to, achieving moksha and one with Brahman. Those are the big things. Know kind of why it breaks with Hinduism, although Hinduism does absorb a lot of Buddhist practices back into it. Let's see. All right. We're getting to a point where y'all were answering each other's questions because I wasn't going fast enough, which is muy bien. If anybody gets 100 on test, will there be no curve? You got it. That's right. Someone makes 100, the curve is busted. And I think we're close to the end. Well, I don't know what the main difference. I'm kind of skipping comments where y'all are just writing to each other. So I'm looking for question marks. Do Buddhists desire the end of desire? That's an interesting question. I guess maybe you could see that. Well, maybe it's when you free yourself from the pursuit of it because you've gotten so good at it. Any other questions? I think I'm to the end of the list. It's 9:07, so we went nearly an hour. My voice is almost gone. I don't know what the James quotes are, but I probably did ignore them because I scrolled past a bunch. All right, guys, that's it. Will Zoroastrianism be on test? Oh, we got a couple more questions. Zoroastrianism will probably appear on the test somewhere. Most, of course, probably in reference to Persia. What branches of Buddhism and Christianity spread on the Silk Road? Ooh, good question. Good question. So on the Silk Road, we do see Theravada Buddhism spread. We also see Mahayana Buddhism. For Christianity, the big example is Nestorian Christianity, Nestorian Christianity. That is the big one that we see spread. Of course, not in terms of like it becoming a massive Christian community. These are going to be smaller pockets of Christians along the Silk Road. So that is an important note to make. This isn't going to be like a Christian community that is any way in comparison to anything you find in the Mediterranean or in Europe, but smaller pockets of Christian communities within Persia and in Central Asia. Do we need to know any dynasties other than the Han and the Qin? In China, I guess in this time period, those are the main ones. The Zhou dynasty comes to an end during the Warring States period. So up to this point, we've learned about the Shang, Zhou, Qin, and Han, which are the first 4 of our Chinese dynasties. In the next time period, we'll deal with the Tang, Song, the Sui dynasty, the Tang dynasty, the Song dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, and the Ming dynasty, I believe. Shang, Zhou, Qin, Han, Sui, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming. Yeah, so we got like a bunch of them in our next unit for the Chinese dynasties. All right, so when did the Romans start using Christianity to promote their statist agenda? That's something we're actually going to see in our next unit. Both Western and Eastern Christianity being used to further trade agendas. Eastern Orthodox Christianity in our next time period will actually spread to Russia with help of the development of the Cyrillic alphabet and support of Byzantine traders who want to trade with Kievan Rus, which will eventually develop into the Russian state. They're descended from Vikings. We'll get to that. But certainly it will be important in establishing relations. We'll also see competition between Christianity and Islam in certain regions of the world to establish trade relations. I want to say Armenia is our example there, but I can't remember if that's the exact place. But ultimately, around the year 300, Christianity becomes sanctioned and then pushed in the Roman Empire by the year 400. All right, guys. That's it for me. And it's 9:10. I'm going to stop the broadcast since I finally got the volume to work. We're 0 for 2 in getting started, so it's about time. Maybe next time it'll work. Other than that, go back and look at anything that you want. I'm glad right now we have 41 people. I don't know what our peak was, but I think that's pretty darn good. That's 2/3 of you. Get some sleep. That's super important for test day, and do your absolute best. Remember to think during the test. If you think during the test, you'll do quite fine. Adios.